Shalom, little one. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's continue with our story in Shemot. The camp of Yisrael stretched across the wilderness, a gathering of families, flocks, and tents, all centered around one thing, the mountain where Elohim had spoken. They had seen his fire descend upon Sinai, had heard his voice thunder from the heavens, and had received his covenant written in stone. But Elohim was not only the Elohim of the mountain, he was the Elohim of his people, and now he was going to dwell among them. Mosheh stood before the assembly and spoke the words given to him. Elohim has commanded us to build for him a dwelling place, that his presence may be among us. Every heart that is willing, bring an offering to Yahuah, gold and silver, fine linen and blue thread, acacia wood, and precious stones. The people listened, their hearts, once filled with fear, now burned with devotion. They hurried to their tents, gathering all that they had. Some brought gold earrings and silver bracelets, others fine woven fabrics, still others the strong wood needed for building. They came forward willingly, joyfully, laying their gifts before Mosheh. Men skilled in craftsmanship stepped forward. Bezalel and Aholiab were filled with the spirit of Elohim, given wisdom and understanding to craft everything according to the pattern Elohim had shown Mosheh. And so the work began. The people wove fine linen embroidered with blue, purple, and scarlet thread. They hammered gold into thin plates, fastening them into loops and rings. The acacia wood was cut, shaped, and covered in gold. The men labored with skill, their hands moving with purpose, their hearts stirred with the knowledge that they were building something holy. Bit by bit, the pieces came together. They built the curtains of the tabernacle, stretching high around the sacred place. They crafted the Ark of the Covenant, its pure gold covering shining in the light. The wings of the cherubim outstretched over it. They made the table of showbread, where the bread of presence would always be before Elohim. They fashioned a lampstand of gold, its branches carved with almond blossoms, its 7 lamps waiting to shine. They built the altar of incense, where sweet-smelling smoke would rise in worship. They set up the bronze altar, where offerings would be made, and the bronze laver, filled with water for cleansing. Every part of it was made exactly as Elohim had commanded. And when the work was finished, Mosheh stood back and looked upon it all. It was complete. The dwelling place of Elohim was ready. Then Elohim spoke again. "Take Aharon and his sons, and set them apart to serve as priests before me. Make for them set-apart garments of glory and beauty, a breastplate of precious stones, an ephod of gold and fine linen, a robe of blue with bells and pomegranates around its hem, a turban with a gold plate that bore the words, 'Set apart to Yahuah.'" Aharon and his sons stood before the people. Mosheh anointed them with oil, consecrating them for service. From that day on, they would minister before Elohim in the tabernacle. At last, it was time. The tabernacle stood in the center of the camp, its golden furnishings shining, its embroidered curtains swaying in the desert wind. The people gathered as Mosheh took the tablets of the covenant and placed them inside the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was carried into the most set-apart place, behind the great veil, and then a cloud descended, thick, glorious, radiant with the presence of Elohim. It filled the tabernacle, covering it in awe and wonder. The people fell to their knees. Mosheh himself could not enter, for the glory of Yahuah filled the dwelling place. And from that day forward, whenever the cloud remained over the tabernacle, Yisrael stayed where they were. But when the cloud lifted, they knew it was time to move. As they set out, the cloud of Yahuah rose from the tabernacle, moving before them, leading the way. When it moved, they followed. When it remained, they stayed. They traveled not by their own plans, but by the will of the Most High. But the wilderness was vast, and the hearts of the people were still being tested. The sun beat down upon the desert sand, the days stretched long, the nights grew cold, and the journey was not easy. The people began to grumble. "If only we had meat to eat," they cried. "We remember the fish we ate in Mitzrayim, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing but this manna before us." The manna, the bread from the heavens, was like fine flakes, white as coriander seed, tasting like wafers made with honey. It was enough. It had always been enough. But the people longed for more. Mosheh heard their complaints. His spirit grew heavy, and he turned to Yahuah. "Why have you dealt so harshly with me?" he pleaded. "Did I conceive these people? Did I bring them forth that you should say to me, 'Carry them in your arms as a nurse carries a baby'? Where am I to get meat to give to all these people? I cannot bear this burden alone." Yahuah answered him, "Gather 70 men from the elders of Yisrael, men you know to be leaders, and bring them before the tent of meeting. I will take some of the spirit that is upon you and place it upon them, that they may bear the burden with you." And so it was done. The elders stood before the tabernacle, and the spirit of Elohim rested upon them, giving them wisdom to lead. But to the people, Yahuah said, "You have wept for meat, you shall eat, not for 1 day, nor 2 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you. Because you have rejected Yahuah, who is among you, and you have wept before him, saying, 'Why did we leave Mitzrayim?' Then a wind arose. It swept over the camp, bringing quail from the sea, covering the ground 3 feet deep. The people rushed out, gathering the birds by the thousands. They ate, but their greed brought judgment upon them. A plague struck many, and the place was called Kibroth Hatava, the graves of craving. For the people had desired the food of their past more than the provision of their Elohim. The journey continued, but soon another test arose. Miryam and Aharon, Mosheh's own brother and sister, spoke against him. "Has Yahuah only spoken through Mosheh? Has he not also spoken through us?" But Yahuah heard, and suddenly the cloud descended upon the tabernacle. The voice of Elohim called out, "Come forward, Mosheh, Aharon, and Miryam." Trembling, they stepped before him. And Yahuah said, "Hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I make myself known to him in visions. I speak to him in dreams, but not so with my servant Mosheh. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant?" The cloud lifted, and as Miryam turned, her skin was white with leprosy. Aharon cried out, "O my master, do not let this sin remain upon us." Mosheh lifted his voice and pleaded before Elohim, "Heal her now, O Elohim, I pray." And Yahuah, in his mercy, healed Miryam, though she remained outside the camp for 7 days as a sign. The people waited, then they journeyed on. The wilderness was harsh, the journey was long, but the greatest test of all was still ahead. They were approaching the land of promise, and soon the moment of decision would come. Until next time, Laila Tov, little one, Shalom.